Well, I blame Hugo. He did this part of the presentation. That's probably why. Oh, maybe it's another WebKit patch. I didn't look into that one. Anyone have anything to say about any other Apple updates?
Looks like the consensus is that it's a WebKit patch only. Thank you, Bruce. Dwayne, if you have a question, please feel free to ask that or throw it into the chat.
All right, I'm going to move on
Hello.
because we have a lot to
Can,
talk about. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I've read two articles about Sonoma has a different version for an M3 versus for the M12 and the Intel. Is that true?
It is true. I watched a video on it. Yeah, it was this morning actually.
Could
Done
you
by,
put that,
by Mr. McIntosh.
would you put a link to that for me in our meeting notes?
Yeah, let me see if I can find it. I'm sure I can though.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Howie. Thanks, Dwayne.
Awesome. Yeah, that's something I'll definitely look into and update everyone on next month because that's super interesting. I did not realize that was the case. Moving on, we're going to talk about the Jamf updates. 11.1.0 is the latest version as of today. If you're a Jamf Cloud customer, they have not been updated yet unless you requested an upgrade. So you may not see these features yet, but you should get part of the beta program if you're not already.
So I got an update here on Jamf 11.1. Seeing some issues with flushing logs for singular machines as opposed to only having the ability to flush all or flush failed. So keep an eye out for that one. I've seen it on several of
Interesting.
my policies and profiles.
So you're saying you can only flush the logs individually, you can't do them in mass?
Vice versa.
Vice versa, you can only do them in mass, you can't do them individually, which
Correct.
is even worse, probably.
Yep.
Maybe not.
Yep.
But yeah, that is very annoying. So that is good to know because that's often a thing we do if we want to get that policy to push off another time. So I guess the workaround at this point is just to create a new policy, right? Yeah, so that's one to look into. If you're seeing that, make sure you open a ticket with your Jamf rep so they can get more eyes on that, and they're probably going to send out a quick fix for that pretty soon.
Yeah, one of the other ones was Jamf Connect needs to be updated to 2.29 before you go to 14.2.
Oh, that's a good
There was
thing
an
to note.
email
I
that
think,
got sent out.
yeah, I think we saw that as well.
That was a major pain in the behind for us.
Yep.
We had a bunch of early adopters that jumped on it right away, and they actually got the 14.2, or they actually got the OS update before they got the Connect update, and they ended up on a dead screen where they couldn't go anywhere. So that was not a happy day.
Yeah. Okay. I guess while we're talking about it, any other bugs or fixes you had to do in the last month? Feel free to speak up. Otherwise, I'll move on and talk.
Did you guys already talk? I joined late. Did you guys already talk about people slipping up to Sonoma despite restrictions?
Oh, that I guess we talked about that a little bit more last month, but yeah, restrictions for Sonoma had been very difficult to put into place, and I think we just kind of said, all right, we're just going to make sure we update all of our apps to be able to support Sonoma because we had some issues trying to restrict that upgrade. If anyone had a foolproof method to restrict the upgrade, feel free to throw that into the chat. But I know that was a pain point when it came out last month.
I did see one thing. I haven't experimented
Restrictions and
with it yet.
deferrals have been great. Surprisingly.
It is surprising because it seems like a lot of people have had issues with that. I did see one thing on Jamf Nation just the other day. I haven't had a chance to play with it yet, but I think it was Howie. He had said that he'd opened up his profile that he was using for restrictions, and apparently Jamf had stuck a line in there that Apple was no longer supporting. It had something to do with MCX, and so he custom made a profile elsewhere, made sure that wasn't in there, and put it in play, and then his restrictions were working. But I haven't had a chance to play with it.
It has largely worked since I made that change. I actually got the JSON from Jamf, and I separated out the minor macOS update from the major macOS update. So those are two separate profiles, and it makes sense to actually do that anyway. But the problem that we had was we also had another profile that would ensure that you got automatic updates being turned on as well as automatic downloads. It was that profile that was inserting some extra settings in there that I didn't select in the payloads. I flat out didn't do it. And Apple, whenever they analyzed everything, said, "Oh, here's your conflict." And once I eliminated that, bam, everything starts working right again. But what Apple Care did say was that Jamf, and it's probably other MDMs are doing the same thing. They're using this MCX preference wrapper you can notice that if you go into your profiles and you double click one, you can there's going to be several in there that probably have that in there in the information in the profile itself. But you'll see it's still using this MCX wrapper, which they say is supposed to be phased out. So I'd forgotten about that because I remember seeing that back in the old OS X server days, seeing that in there. But I guess Jamf still has it in there, I guess, because they're the need to support all the way back to Catalina officially is where they still support. So I don't know. I don't want to keep the meeting going on that one subject, but I thought I'd throw that out there.
Cool. Yeah, I'm going to move on so we can get to the presentation. But so a couple updates I want to go through with Jamf. One thing is the summary view for app installers. Essentially, it looks like this. It's a little bit of better view to look at, so you can see what's happening. You can also retry any failed commands when you deploy app installers through Mac apps. Another exciting feature we talked about last month when it came out in the beta is Jamf Remote Assist. This is a really cool product, able to easily connect to users' computers straight through the Jamf GUI without any type of integration with like TeamViewer or anything else. And it's completely free at this point. It doesn't cost any extra licenses. So you make sure you check that out. Might be a cool tool you can use for your help desk. And then lastly, the macOS onboarding window also came out with this release. So this was something Jamf showed at JNUC that had this cool looking self-service window that looks a lot like Splash Buddy, the old Splash Buddy that used to tell you like when each application was installing. So I kind of wanted to give you a quick view of what this looked like. I threw this together roughly today. But to set this up is a little bit weird. So first of all, when you set up your policies, this is just in one of our test servers, you need to use self-service as a trigger and no other triggers. So you're not using enrollment or check-in or anything else. You're just using self-service. Another thing to note is it's not going to use the policy name. It's going to use the self-service display name, which is great because you can make the policy name whatever you want. And then for configuration profiles, we're doing the same thing, where we're using make available and self-service as the deployment method instead of install automatically, which seems a little counterintuitive based on how Jamf works. Once you've got that set up, then you can go to the macOS onboarding section of self-service. This is new, and you just select all the policies and configuration profiles that you want to add to this onboarding screen. So that's how it looks like to set it up. Now, what does it actually look like in practice? So once the computer enrolls and self-service launches, this is what comes up. So they'll get a screen. Now, I didn't put any icons here as I was setting this up, which is why you see a lot of these blank, but these are just self-service icons. So it goes through each one of the policies and configuration profiles one by one. It seems to go in alphabetical order, so it's something to be aware of. And it will install these. And then once it's done, you get this setup complete and a continue button. Once they click continue, it just goes to the normal self-service. So pretty slick workflow that Jamf just put in here. And you might be thinking, as we're about to look at another onboarding window that's going to take a bit more setup and not built straight into Jamf, well, what's the point of using something like swiftDialog? Jamf's already got this here. You make a point, but I guess let's talk through some of the limitations of this macOS onboarding window. For us who have gotten used to using tools like Dep Notify or the newer swiftDialog, we're used to the customizability of it. What are the limitations of this? Well, there's a lot of them. So first off, it doesn't work with app installers. You can't specify really the order of the installs, although if you put them in alphabetical order, you can kind of work with that a little bit. You can't add like any dependencies though. You can't really customize the display at all. That text at this point, at least, is something you can't change. You can't use it outside of enrollment. So it only happens when the computer is first enrolled. Sometimes we do a workflow like migrating people from Nomad to Jamf Connect, and we use a Dep Notify window for that. You can't do this with this onboarding window. It's only for enrollment. You can't add video files. You can't add pictures. You can't change the text. You can't prompt the user for info. So if you wanted the user to go into a specific building or department, you can't prompt it through this window. You can't guide user through any of the processes. Essentially, all it's doing is telling you what things are being installed during this process. And it doesn't work with app installers. So it is really cool. And I think if this is all you're looking for, it is awesome. But if you're looking for a little bit more, that's where, Dan Lawrence's presentation he's about to talk about with swiftDialog is going to be helpful. Any additional Jamf updates that I missed? From this last update?
Looks like the chat was vibing the whole time that you were going, Chris. So there's a lot of good information in the chat in case you guys haven't popped that open yet.
I'm trying to keep up with it. It's very overwhelming.
That's a good problem.
Remote assist at this point is not paid or licensed. It's just included with 11.1, which I think is crazy. I definitely thought they were going to charge for that. So go ahead and check that out.
There is one thing that I saw some commentary on Jamf Nation about the onboarding is that in the documentation, it makes it look as if you set all this stuff up, it's going to apply it to the computers that are currently enrolled and not just to the ones that you're wanting to enroll, like new computers coming in. So if that's not so, they wrote it in a very confusing way.
Sorry, what was that?
Well, if you look at the documentation, I can probably go and pull it up, but it basically has a message in there that's that whatever you set up in the onboarding is going to. It almost seems like it's about to apply it to the computers that are already enrolled, that are currently enrolled. Sort of like the way Jamf Now works with blueprints. So you have a blueprint of all these things you're going to do on these Macs, and then you make a change to it. Well, then that's going to be applied to everything that enrolled through that blueprint. It's almost like
yeah.
That's
something to keep in mind. Is all current computers when you deploy that will also get it. I haven't really tested that out and saw how it would work, but that that's kind of interesting. I guess you maybe want to scope it just to computers that have enrolled after that specific date if you don't want everyone to just get this random window popping up. Self-service also needs to be launched. I honestly did not spend a lot of time testing this. I just put together this quick video. So I think there's a lot of caveats to look at, but I wanted to at least give everyone an idea of what it looked like.
Yeah,
Does
it's
it
really
block
helpful.
any user interaction when it's running?
Sorry, what was that?
So when the onboarding is running, does it prevent the user from doing anything else until it's all complete?
It does not.
It does not. No, it doesn't prevent them from doing anything. So that window is just kind of running, and it's basically self-service. So they can close the window, they can do whatever they want, they can open applications. But yeah, you can't lock them down to just seeing that screen like you could with Dep Notify. And I think you can with swiftDialog as well. I'm not as familiar. But we'll be able to ask Dan about that.
If you have a Jamf Connect, Jamf Connect has a version of Dep Notify built in. Jamf Connect Notify, it locks them. So
yeah. And if you want to use that as well, I mean, that's basically just using Dep Notify. But if you want to use the one built into the GUI through Jamf, then you're pretty limited to that. Lastly, I want to go through a couple small LaunchPad updates, basically just showing you what we have on the docket in the next couple months. So next month, Friday, January 5th, we have Escrow Buddy, which is going to be presented by Elliot Jordan. Really excited for that, to get a little bit more of a deep dive in how that tool works. And then on February 2nd, we have the macOS Security Compliance Project presented by Mac Woodruff. This is a great upgrade kind of to all the security things that Jamf is doing, and a way to bring all your devices in compliance on top of using Jamf Pro and Jamf Connect and all the other tools. Lastly, we always end this saying the Gravity Times, saying if you have any feature requests, we got, I think, 144 people on the call right now. So drop them into the chat. We'll get some upvotes. We'll get some more exposure to those things that you want Jamf to start adding to the product, or anything that you want them to start fixing. So if you have any that are burning on you, just throw them into the chat. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dan Snelson. So I'll stop sharing my screen. Dan just put a feature request in here.
Are you able to hear
out.
me and see my screen?
We can.
Excellent. I'm actually going to turn the video off in Zoom.
We've seen you working hard in the chat. So Dan's the hardest working person on this Jamf admin meetup right now. But we hear you loud and clear. Looks great.
All right. I need to hit the record button on memos. All right, we're ready?
We are ready to go.
All right. Greetings from Columbus, Ohio. I am honored to be addressing the last Rocket Man LaunchPad for 2023. Can you hardly believe it? Woo. My name is Dan Snelson, and I am a senior system engineer with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We are sometimes called Mormons because of our belief in a volume of companion scripture to the Holy Bible called the Book of Mormon. Let's talk about using Set Up Your Mac Helper to jumpstart your user's onboarding experience. Here is our agenda. We'll first level set by talking about swiftDialog, Set Up Your Mac, and Set Up Your Mac Helper. We'll spend the bulk of our time together demonstrating how Set Up Your Mac Helper can jumpstart your user's onboarding experience. I'll then highlight areas where you should expect to hand code to apply your organization's specific racing stripes. We'll finish up with how you can contribute, where you can find support, and I'll try to answer any questions. Additionally, at the end of many slides, I'll pause for questions about that slide, so you don't have to try to remember your questions through the entire process. Please enter your questions in the chat and someone will read them for the entire audience. So sound good? Let's continue. First, let's level set with a few about slides. None of this would be possible without BART and swiftDialog. BART has provided the Mac admin community swiftDialog, an open source utility written in SwiftUI, which requires macOS Monterey 12 or later, that displays a pop-up dialog which can include content-rich messages for your end users. While BART is fond of saying that swiftDialog itself has no brains, swiftDialog can return various values from user input on which your script can act and continue processing. The project is available on GitHub, and BART has an extensive wiki with detailed examples. Additionally, there's built-in help when you need a quick answer. Here's a QR code for BART's JNUC session from last year. Are there any general questions about swiftDialog? Well, Set Up Your Mac is a 3,000 plus line bash script, which was originally inspired by Adam's code and then James's code on which it still relies. Some recent heavy lifting has been provided by Bart himself, for which I'm personally grateful. The latest blog post can always be found at the displayed URL or the QR code, and is probably the best place to get started. Let's look at a demo. Here's a demo of automated device enrollment and Set Up Your Mac being executed via self-service, which we call the Workforce App Store. While we prompt users to initiate Set Up Your Mac via self-service, you can have Set Up Your Mac execute automatically immediately after enrollment. The blog post referenced earlier includes a link to Rob's site where you could learn how to leverage a pre-stage enrollment package. Set Up Your Mac Helper makes it a breeze to customize which fields initially display, so you can prompt your users for the exact information dictated by your business requirements. Users are presented with an estimated duration of the entire process based on their current internet connection. And users can see detailed information on the progress of application installations, including if there are any failures. Are there any general questions about Set Up Your Mac?
Hi, Dan. I've got a question.
Please.
You had in the previous screen about 30 seconds ago, you had 3 items there. There was the installation type was required and then 2 other options. Does that just allow you to configure additional applications to be installed beyond what is required by the organization?
Correct. We call those configurations, and the names that I came up with are required, recommended, and complete. Excellent question. Any other general questions on Set Up Your Mac? Well, Leslie has outdone himself yet again with Set Up Your Mac Helper. Set Up Your Mac Helper is a standalone Mac OS app, which makes the always tedious work of building your custom policy JSON an absolute delight. But Leslie didn't stop there. Many variables, but not all, can be modified or toggled in Set Up Your Mac Helper. My site is probably the best place to get started with Set Up Your Mac Helper. Let's look at a number of demos for jumpstarting your user's onboarding experience with Set Up Your Mac Helper. Now for the fun part. But as always, before we can have any fun, we need to do a little work. Each Jamf Pro policy you wish to execute with Set Up Your Mac needs to first have a custom trigger. Take some time on a naming convention and use it consistently. Whomever follows you when you land your next big gig will be glad that you did. Next, please be aware that Set Up Your Mac Helper leverages a few fields from a policy's self-service tab, even if the policy is disabled from being displayed in self-service. Finally, my personal recommendation is that you have dedicated enrollment policies. A number of Mac admins have recently reported issues with their customized Set Up Your Mac script going sideways, and the root cause was too many racing stripes in the policies being executed by Set Up Your Mac. Any questions about the pre-work you'll have to do before launching Set Up Your Mac Helper for the first time? Oh, what do I mean by racing stripes? Anything that's extra. Anything that's extra is a racing stripe. As just one example of how Leslie outdid himself with Set Up Your Mac Helper, one of my favorite features is the ability to specify a script source. Let's take a look at a demo. We'll launch Set Up Your Mac Helper and log in. We'll click the settings icon in the bottom left-hand corner to quickly access the default source, which is the main branch. Let's select a different branch, in this case 1.13.0. So we'll change main to 1.13.0. So that was a demo of specifying your own script source and Set Up Your Mac Helper. If you have your own fork of Set Up Your Mac, you may wish to try specifying it in Set Up Your Mac Helper. And note, this screencast is already outdated. The main branch is now version 1.13.0, but there is a 1.13.1 branch available if you'd like to test this feature for yourself. Any questions about script source and Set Up Your Mac Helper? So why would you change the script source? So let's say you forked my repo and you have made your own changes, but you still want to leverage Set Up Your Mac Helper. Or you want to test a development build. So for example, my main branch right now is 1.13.0, but 1.13.1 is available. So you could run it against that. Let's quickly review the remaining settings. We'll launch Set Up Your Mac Helper. We'll log in. We'll click the settings icon in the bottom left-hand corner. Populating your customized list of buildings and departments is just a click away. Any questions about settings and set up your Mac helper? Let's look at a demo of building a default configuration, which is required before being able to generate a customized Set Up Your Mac script. We'll launch Set Up Your Mac helper. And we'll log in. We've already completed our Jamf Pro policy pre-work and have dedicated enrollment policies, so let's filter on enrollment. We can easily add policies from the left column to the selected configuration by double-clicking. We can click the plus button to add a validation. Multiple triggers can be displayed to the user as a single item by first selecting them, then clicking Group. Next, we'll add a local validation for File Vault, which is built in to Set Up Your Mac. We'll continue adding policies from the list on the left by double-clicking. When you use the so-called file path validation, you can use the select button to navigate in the file system for the desired app. Then manually enter /contents/info.plist. So here we'll grab global protect and then we'll manually enter contents and info.plist. You'll always want to end with a local validation of recon and also specify the command of recon to update your Jamf Pro server for the newly enrolled Mac. We'll save the file to the desktop and we'll open it up in Visual Studio Code. We'll get our windows arranged. Then we're going to search for policy JSON equals. You'll notice the validations that we manually entered are missing data for list item, icon, and progress text. In a previously elevated terminal window, let's execute the script as is. The so-called welcome screen looks good. And here we see the missing information from our policy JSON. On the left, we have a sample policy JSON from the GitHub repo, which we'll use to copy pasta the missing information in our customized Set Up Your Mac script. Save this out. I don't want to continue filling out all these fields for the rest of the demos. Let's return to set up your Mac helper and turn most of those off. We'll go to settings, prompt 4. We'll toggle off most of these prompts. And then we'll click generate script to replace our previous script. If you look at the VS Code window in the background, you'll see the changes we manually made are blown away when we regenerated the script and set up your Mac helper. We'll re-copy pasta. Save. And rerun the script. Hey, now we only have to enter the asset tag. Oh, nice. Everything's showing up. So any questions about defining your default configuration and set up your Mac helper?
One thing I've been chatting with someone with Tony in the chat about is whether or not this can support app installers, since there's no real, it's not a policy, so we don't know when they're going to install.
So the answer is no, and I'll put a link here in the chat. And then somebody asked about grouping. So the purpose of grouping is to present a single item to the end user, but you're running multiple policies at once. So for example, we have our final configuration does many things that we don't want end users to see, but we just call it final configuration. So that's why you would group things. And I just put in the chat the open feature request about app catalog instruments. Some of us are hosted on-prem and don't have the option to leverage those. Okay, I'll move on, but we can still have other questions. So let's look at a demo of building the so-called complete configuration. So we'll set up your Mac helper and log in. Our previous work on the default configuration is here, so let's use it to build what we refer to as our complete configuration. But before we do, let's look up the variable name for the third configuration. Okay, here's the snippet of code which displays the various configuration names based on the variable values. You'll make it easy on yourself if you use these exact variable names when naming your configurations and set up your Mac helper. And once again, we'll add policies from the left column to our complete configuration by double-clicking. And then policy order can be changed by drag and drop. A pro tip, I found it easiest to build and test my customized Set Up Your Mac script by running Set Up Your Mac helper on an enrolled, fully configured Mac. And here for Office, I'm just arbitrarily picking Outlook. But then we're going to leverage a remote validation for the whole suite. All right, let's generate the script. Okay, then we've got our new items, and you'll notice the items we have for local validations aren't there. So any questions about defining your complete configuration? Let's look at building the two remaining configurations. We'll launch Set Up Your Mac Helper. And we'll log in. Our previous work on the so-called complete configuration is already selected, so let's use it to build what we refer to as our recommended configuration. But before we do, let's grab this variable name. And this time, we're going to remove policies from the right column by double-clicking. And let's build our last configuration, but this time we'll clone the default. Generate the script. Let's just run it as is here. This time we'll choose recommended. We still have these missing local validations, so let's go fix those. Everything else looks good. So we'll search again for policy JSON equals. We'll update this information. Okay, let's test this out with just getting the last policy fixed for the recon. We'll do complete this time. Okay, so we've got our last one fixed. We just need to fix the file vault. Okay, last paste here. Let's save this out. We recommended this time. Hey, that looks good. So any questions about defining our last two configurations and set up your Mac helper? Now for the detail work. While the current version of Set Up Your Mac Helper handles much of the heavy lifting, it hasn't yet replaced your preferred code editor. Specifically, when testing locally via terminal, you'll need to manually change the defaults for the various script parameters like debug mode. New in version 1.13.0 is the Armin-inspired Set Up Your Mac Helper comment, which will hopefully tell you which settings you can and can't yet modify and set up your Mac helper. Hopefully, it was clear from the earlier demos that for local validations, you'll need to manually update the missing data each time you generate a fresh script from Set Up Your Mac Helper. And last on this list, which is by no means comprehensive, is configuration variables. Unless you like the three names we're using, you'll want to make some modifications here too. Any questions on hand coding requirements? Well, each of you is invited to contribute. We have an incredible list of contributors. The Mac Admin Slack has a dedicated channel for conversations and best effort support of Mac admins leveraging Set Up Your Mac. If it's okay, I'd like to ask the first question. How does Set Up Your Mac compare to Jamf Pro's new macOS onboarding? Let's look at several features of both Set Up Your Mac and macOS onboarding. Distribution and support are probably the key differences. And for some of you, that's where this comparison ends. I get it. Your organization requires commercially produced, vendor-supported solutions. For the rest of us, please be aware that macOS onboarding was introduced in Jamf Pro 11.1. So if you're running an earlier version, you'll need to first upgrade. If features like a branded, customizable interface, full screen experience, or capturing user input are important to your workflow, you may wish to open a feature request with Jamf Pro. You'll want to carefully review Jamf's documentation about which computers will be affected. Likewise, about your options to initiate the workflow and which policies can be included. And here's a biggie. You may not want to spend your time hand coding, and you may not even have a preferred code editor. I also get that. Last, but certainly not least, is the engine on which these two options run. I'm happy to answer any questions about set up your Mac features, and will refer you to Jamf's documentation or your Jamf contacts for questions about macOS onboarding. So here we can open it up to questions.
I had one. I put this in the meeting chat, but you probably just didn't see it. But about a custom branding banner. I got that working. I had actually deployed a local one, but I don't really want to do that. So what's the best way to get that, to actually have a customized branding banner?
So we leverage our self-service branding. So we already have customized banners and self-service, and we just grab the URL, and that's what we use.
Yeah, I did try that and it worked. I just wasn't satisfied with that solution. So
then you may need to deploy something client side. If you're not, if you're not happy with something web hosted, you'll have to deploy it client side.
Okay.
Great question.
Hey, Dan, I just want to mention now that we're at the top of the hour, people are going to start dropping off most likely. Amazing presentation. Thank you so much. I don't want to take up too much time. I know we'll keep this open a little bit, but just because we are at the top of the hour, thank you so much for that amazing presentation. And we will post this recording on our YouTube channel, which you can find at Rocketman Tech if you YouTube that and sift through some Elton John stuff.
Very good.
We're also going to have a survey, a very, very brief survey that will happen within the browser of Zoom once the meeting ends. So if you guys are able to, please stick around till the end of the meeting to fill out that very quick survey. And now, if anybody has any other questions for Dan, I want to go ahead and give you guys that time.
And I myself am going to have to attend another meeting.
Well, that makes this easy.
So if you let me put the Mac admin Slack there, and I guess I could just mute myself and stay on this meeting while people take a screenshot of that, but I do need to join another meeting. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate all your help.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. So real quick, I'm going to go ahead and we'll wrap up the meeting here, and then a brief survey will go out. Again, thank you guys all for attending. We look forward to seeing you next month. Don't want to keep anybody from their next meetings. Feel free to follow up with us at rocketman.tech. It's a great way to get our emails. And we look forward to seeing you guys all at the next meetup. Thanks so much for attending.